Hey y'all, this is Michelle from SLP Full Disclosure. I wanted to share some really exciting news with you guys. AMN Healthcare is thrilled to announce their $5,000 biannual scholarship, and it is now open for submissions. So if you are a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, a speech language pathologist, or a school psychologist, please visit the link in our show notes and make your submission by December the 15th. A personal essay that reflects on your experiences, your mentors, and anything that has shaped your goals and passions for helping others. Hey y'all, welcome to SLP Full Disclosure. I'm your host, Michelle, and today we are joined by Kevin Simmons that I found by maybe or maybe not stalking his Instagram. So that's how I came across Kevin and I reached out to him. But we're so excited to have Kevin Simmons with us today. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. I'm super excited.
Yay! So Kevin is a pediatric speech therapist in Gainesville, Georgia, so another Southerner, which I'm super excited about, but he doesn't have the Southern drawl like I do. His passions include using music to integrate into speech therapy sessions, sensory haircuts, which I'm so excited to talk about, and an inclusive approach to therapy to support the patients that he sees on a daily basis. So Kevin, super excited to have you here. The Singing SLP. First of all,
That's right.
Tell us how you got that name. Is that something that you kind of coined yourself, or is that something that your friends and colleagues started calling you?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting ride. Once I graduated from Radford University, I had a lot of friends that knew that I love music and wanted to put it into practice. But actually, we can go back into college because I was doing a outpatient service, working with adults, and just to do a warm up, my classmates were introducing themselves, and I was like, "Well, I got to be different. I don't want to just say like, hey, I'm Kevin." So I gave them a full performance. It was a full Michael Jackson
Oh my gosh.
rendition. Yeah, it was the whole nine. And after I finished, a lot of the adults were laughing, and one of the guys was like, you should be like a singer. You should be like a singing SLP or something. And I was like, okay. And so that kind of stuck. And then fast forward to my last semester in grad school, same thing. I was doing treatment for a kid, and one of the parents was like, "Oh, you like music? You should keep using that and incorporating that in your sessions and be like the singing SLP." And I was like, "Okay, that's
the
it.
second time I've heard it.
That's the name." So, yeah, started putting up some content on Instagram and making it a page and just kind of running with that idea. First, it was just general content, education, but I really didn't get into like the musical aspect and like making funny videos, using music to help kids and adults learn until maybe 3 or 4 months into 2023. And after that, I've gotten comments about like, oh, my son watches Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes song. Like, you do such a great job with it. And so it just brings me joy to keep making content like that.
I love it.
Thank you.
That is so exciting. And your videos are awesome. And at the end, we're going to talk about where all of our listeners can find you on social media, because if you do not follow the Singing SLP, you definitely need to. So first of all, you talked about where you went to graduate school. Tell me how you came into this field of speech language pathology in such a female dominated profession, because we don't see a lot of men and we do need to see more men.
Yes. So I actually didn't know about speech therapy until I was 24, 25 years old, when I was getting ready to apply to grad school programs. I had finished up my bachelor's at Kennesaw State, and it was exercise science and psychology. And I took a year off just trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. So, for the listener out there, I want to tell them that it's okay to take a year off, learn more about yourself. That's one of the biggest pieces of advice I'd give to any young or even older aspiring SLP going back to school. I've just learned so much during that year. So I took a year off, and I was trying to figure out what to do with exercise science. I thought I was going to kind of follow my sister's footsteps with physical therapy, but the grades weren't there and I didn't want to retake and do 2 more years of that
Right.
process. So I started asking friends, like, what could I do with my degree? And some things popped up like OT, occupational therapy.
Mm-hmm.
It sparked a little interest, but I was like, I really want to. I love listening to people's stories. Like, I just love listening. And I was trying to figure out how I could do that. And I remember one small group I was at, um, there is 3 or 4 girls. It was a big 20 or 25 group Bible study. And 4 or 5 of the girls were speech therapists. And I just didn't even, it didn't register in my mind at the time.
Right.
But I remember I was asking one of the ladies, I said, you know, what is it that you actually do? Like, I just remember my brother had speech therapy and he was working on his R's. So I didn't know anything about it. And
Right. And so many people don't even know what we do. I mean,
right.
they don't know the depth and the diversity of this field. And you're right. Most people, when they
Yeah.
think of speech therapy, they think the kid who can't say their R's or their
R
L's or
sounds.
their S's.
Yep.
And there's so much more to it than that.
Yep. Exactly. So, I just had that mental image that it was just going to be working on sounds. And I was like, all right, that's still fine. Like, so she got me hooked up with a speech therapist in the city. So I went to Shadow, and it was one of those like light bulb moments.
The
Feel
aha
like
moment.
we
Yeah.
all have those moments in life, and everything clicked. I mean, like from the kids, um, seeing an evaluation to a quick story. I'll tell you how like it was confirmation. This autistic child, she was working on social skills and she was about 10 or 11. And she just had a history. She just had a tough past and she just didn't talk to guys. Like, it was just one of those moments. And the speech therapist said, hey, sit in the corner, write your notes, and we'll just go from there. And so she comes in and they get to talking, get towards the end of the session. And she was like, hey, so and so, you know that there's someone else in the room. And again, just working on pragmatics, like uh, greeting someone.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, you can say hi. And so she said hi, but she was like facing away from me, and I noticed she had a Marvel shirt on, and I love Marvel. Big movie guy, big
Yeah.
music, yeah. And so I was like, "Oh my gosh, you have a Marvel shirt! Did you see the last movie?" And you could kind of see her like perk up a little bit. She wasn't turning towards me, but still like perked up, and she was like, "Yeah, I saw it." And we just started talking back and forth, and like slowly she opened up and
Oh,
looked my way, and at the very end, the speech therapist took her back out to see her mom, and they were out there for about 10 minutes. She comes back in and tells me, sorry that it took so long, but I told, mom what happened. And um, they broke down in tears because she said that was the
oh,
first time she's talked to a guy in 2 or 3 years.
oh
It
my
had been so
gosh.
long. Yeah. She's had, many therapists, some men included. She would
Didn't make
have
that
them in the room,
connection.
but yeah. So from that moment, as soon as she said that, I was like, okay, this is it.
This
Like,
is
this
what I'm going
is
to do.
what. So yeah, I remember going home and looking up programs that I could apply to, and found a lot of leveling degrees. So I had my background in something other than speech, and I was
Right.
able to do the prerequisites.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that moment, it was like the rest was history. Went to grad
Wow.
school for 3 years, and um, still loving it,
Such
enjoying
a
it.
beautiful story. I love
Thank
that.
you.
And I think that as speech pathologists, um, we probably all have stories like that. And my story is similar. I
Uh-huh.
had that where I was able to work at the residential facility when I was in
Wow.
college and work with all of the disciplines: OT, PT, speech,
Mm.
hearing impaired, vision impaired, audiology, the teachers,
Wow.
speech path. And I knew the moment that I sat in and watched that speech pathologist, I was like, that's what I want to do.
This is it. Yeah.
That's it. Like, it was immediate. That's
What
such a
were they
beautiful
working
story.
on?
It was
Do you
back,
remember?
Kevin, I'm old. We've talked about this on the
No,
podcast
no, you're
before.
not.
I am probably old enough to be your mother. It was back in the early 90s, and that's when the augmentative communication first came out and was
Oh,
starting to
yeah.
really boom.
Yeah.
And I worked in a residential facility with adolescent males who were born in the 70s, like myself, and some even in the 60s and before. And back then the supports were not there. There wasn't
Right.
early intervention, and typically these individuals who were born with disabilities were oftentimes put in facilities. And so the men that I worked with had no way to communicate. A lot of them were nonverbal, and so it was, and they were my age. I was 18, 19 years old. And some of them, I mean, the men that I worked with were, 20 to 35.
Wow.
So it was a very, eye-opening experience to think I can be a part of someone's life to give them the way to give them a way to communicate, just to ask for a drink of water and to
Absolutely.
greet someone on the sidewalk using these devices. And it was incredible,
That's
the
beautiful.
growth that they saw in so many of these men who had spent the majority of their lives unable to communicate.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it was
I
incredible.
love that.
So you graduate, you start working, and you're in a pediatric clinic, correct?
Correct.
And did you immediately start using music in your therapy sessions?
It it was a slow progress. That's a good question. It was a slow progress because I, as a CF, as a clinical fellow, scared just like every other clinical
Oh, yeah.
fellow.
Wide-eyed. Don't even
Right,
know what you don't know. Yeah, I
right,
remember those
right.
days.
Yeah, we have our license, but still, we're just like fresh. So a lot of questions, a lot of like timidness, where it's like I'm gonna use what I've learned from school,
Right.
and just go with that. Like I don't want to kind of stick away from what I don't know. So it took some time, but like once I found that groove, and I could talk about music, I mean, the whole podcast, because it just has so many benefits. But yeah, once I found that groove and found that like, um, even my older kids, like they love beats, working on
Yeah,
articulation, like that, it just blossomed from there. So now I use it anywhere and everywhere.
that's awesome.
But it took some time.
Tell us,
Yes.
let's talk about the benefits of using music in your therapy sessions. What do you feel like the benefits are?
Yeah. So, in terms of language, I've been having and working with a lot of kids with that are Gestalt language processors. So, to sum it up, and not to take away from the time, but a Gestalt language processor, they take larger chunks of information and use that as communication.
Right.
So the
It's
way
kind of
we
that memorization piece, right?
Right, right. So, say they take something from a TV show, the Singing SLP loves music. So they take that, and apply it to when they go in the car with mom and dad and they hear a song. The Singing SLP loves music. So it's their interpretation of, I like this song.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I have a lot of kids that are just all language processors, and music is their main mode of communication at times. So I will like sing songs. I have a couple videos where I have a little girl where I'll play the guitar. We're going out the door. We're going out the door. Hi ho, there we go. We're going out the door. And
Yep.
mom will send me videos later on where she'll keep that same intonation, that same rhythm,
Mm-hmm.
while they're at the store. And it's the cutest thing. It was like, um, I'm riding in the cart. I'm riding in the cart. So it's the language behind that where our brain can pick up the rhythm and help with communication. I love music again for the research behind with articulation. A lot of times kids have difficulty with that prosody. I always talk about prosody and
Mm-hmm.
what that means, but it's the rhythm of our speech. So
Right.
we could have robotic speech and it is choppy, right? So
Right.
providing that intonation and that prosody where Again, using that example, say we're working on the L sound, let's go outside, let's go outside. So they have the lyrics, they have that rhythm to let that tongue go up and flow out,
Mm-hmm.
rather than just me, which is still beneficial, but I like to provide that creativity,
Yeah.
than doing the
And it
cards
keeps
and
them
do
engaged.
let's. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
Because the rhythm and the repetitive patterns in the music help them memorize those words and memorize those expressions. Because I know I can
right.
memorize the words to a song, but if you gave me, a speech to memorize, it'd be really hard.
Right.
But I listened to Thomas Rhett's new album this morning, and I've already memorized the words to a lot of those songs. So it's that rhythm and that repetitive pattern that really helps to, even in
Yes.
adults.
Yes. And Michelle, you brought up a good piece. Like, I mean, I'm telling you, this stuff gets me so excited.
I love
But
it.
that too is another reason why, yeah, I call myself the singing SLP, but that's how I studied in grad school. Like, that's just how I've studied all my
You put it
life.
to music.
Right. So those rote skills, we talk about that, and you said repetitiveness. Yeah, we can. I thought, like, how can we memorize a whole album? But like when it comes to test time, it's like, oh man, I forget. So like that's
Yeah.
another, I guess, reason and purpose of the singing SLP, and like why I want to use music, because even for older adults, like to remember things from the past, immediate recall and delayed recall, music, like it provides, I've done some research, it's called the music brain, our right hemisphere. It provides those connections and helps us remember, you know,
Wow.
way down the line, let's go shopping, let's go shopping.
Yeah,
What store you went to, what did you get and all that stuff. So it's, music is, I love
I
it.
know. And
I
you
love
talked
it.
about the prosody earlier, and I know that in my experience in working with children with autism, that music can help change
Right.
that monotonous speech pattern and
Yep.
change
Yep.
that flat affect that we often see.
Exactly.
So I
Yeah.
have to ask you this: do you usually make up your songs, or are you using? Because you said you were singing Michael Jackson when you introduced yourself. So
Yeah.
do you use like artists and popular music that you play to get the kids engaged, or is it songs like "We're Going to the Park,"
Yeah.
like things that you make up? And you play the guitar. Do you play the guitar?
No, I do not. I try to
I've seen
pretend
you.
like I do.
I've seen you with the little guitar. It looks almost like a little ukulele, and I was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, she plays the guitar too."
No, I wish. I'm strumming randomly. But that's a good question. So I started off with like songs that I knew. Like take it back to grad school.
Hmm.
I made a song, The Cranial Nerves, trying to remember.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh my gosh.
Olfactory, optic. Yeah.
Cranial
So
nerves.
I know.
It makes my brain hurt just thinking about it.
Right. Uh, but it's impressive. You can, tell your friends like, "Hey, you've been using your optic nerve,"
Yeah.
and it's like, Michelle, I don't care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Right.
um, I created a song based off Mulan. Let's get down to business to learn about the nerves.
Oh my
So
gosh, Kevin, you're so
yeah,
creative. Most speech pathologists
thank you.
are very creative. I am not creative at all. So,
No, I think you are. Um, and so I made that song and a list of other songs based on artists that I like. So that's how I started off. But now I've started to kind of lean into the like SoundCloud. I'll get a beat from there, a free beat, and
oh wow.
just, yeah, do a rendition of Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes. So I like to do two variations. So yeah, we could take the um, Thomas Rhett song, Beat This Summer,
Uh-huh.
and do like Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes. But I also like to sometimes switch it up where it's just like a beat that I made up. Boom, 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 head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Boom, boom, boom. So yeah, that musical aspect. But
Okay, so your next endeavor, this is what you need to put on your to-do list. You need
okay.
to create an album
I
that
do.
you can sell so that other speech pathologists can take your beats and your music and use it in their therapy sessions, because I would never be
You're
able to
so
take a
right.
beat from SoundCloud. Like that just
Yeah.
not going to happen. I don't even know how to access SoundCloud. So that's what you need to do next is you
No,
need to
you're right.
produce. Because I remember when I first saw this, and I talk about this with a lot of my early intervention families, and this is going to tell you, I've already told you I was born in the 70s, so I'm really old. But when I first graduated from graduate school, I was working in Orlando, Florida in a school district, and we had the speech therapist that was there before me had left me, lots of activities. Well, one of those activities was a cassette tape. You probably don't even know what a cassette
No,
tape
are you
is, do
kidding
you,
me?
Kevin?
Yes,
Okay.
of course I
So it
do.
was a cassette tape
Yeah.
that I played on a tape player where you
Yep.
had to rewind it and play it and do all the things. But
Hey,
it
I had a
came.
Walkman growing up.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
you know what a cassette tape is.
Yeah.
So, and I would play it, but the song was, and it had the little picture book that went with it. And it was apple, apple,
Yeah.
apple, apple, and it went through the entire alphabet. It was my favorite. I would give anything
Wow.
to be able to find that cassette tape. And I remember specifically the
Wow.
day that I left there, we were moving to Alabama. And I was telling the new speech pathologist that was coming in, okay, here's this little thing. And she, we're starting to get into the 2000s and cassette tapes are going out. And I'm like, I know it's a cassette tape, but this is really beneficial and it's really
Mm.
helpful. I don't even know if I could find a tape player to play that if I did find it. But it was
Wow.
awesome. I loved it. And I
Yeah.
think about it all the time. I was like, gosh, I wish I had that.
Yeah. And that's what excites me. Like anybody can use music. And people are like, oh man, but you use the guitar. Like I am the least musically talented person. And you
I
would be
think I'm going to have
surprised,
to
but
disagree with you.
no, I'm so serious that I used to play the saxophone. I used to play the
Oh, I
drums, but
did
like,
too. Oh my
really?
gosh. I played the saxophone in high school.
Really? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like the most beautiful instrument.
it
Why I
is.
gave it up, I'm so mad at myself. My mom is still mad at me, but yeah,
I
it's the most
just got
beautiful
rid of
instrument.
my saxophone. Yeah, I just got rid of my saxophone not long ago. We kept moving it from
Wow.
storage to storage, and my daughter was like, Mom, you have got to get rid of this thing. But she would always open it up and play with it when she was little. It was so
Yeah,
fun. That's so
yeah.
funny.
No, but yeah, I
Okay.
mean, like anybody, even if you don't have a musical background, you still have that musical creativity. And that's why I'm like, in sessions, you don't even have to be rhythmic, just like boom, boom. You're playing in the sand in a sensory
Yeah.
bed. We're playing in the sand. We're playing, and like kids love it. They think you're
Yeah.
like, I don't
I
know,
think it's
Elvis
the best thing
Presley. Like
ever.
yeah, they think you're so talented. So that's why I always press use music. Like it doesn't matter what you use, pencils, like just do it.
Have you
Kids love it.
have you found that there's a specific genre that works best? Like if you're using artists, like is it rap? Is it country? Have you found a
Um,
specific genre that the kids respond to better than others?
that's interesting. I haven't, but I will say, like some of the, Miss Rachel, the Wiggles, like any like pop ish song,
Mm-hmm.
like they gravitate towards that. And like, again, going back to the kid I serve, she almost like has a Miss Rachel voice.
Uh-huh.
So, and Miss Rachel uses a lot of music. So like that's why I think not just with that pop,
Mm-hmm.
kind of rhythm, but just like any musical approach, kids
Yeah.
like latch onto it and they want to imitate. So like
Right.
even if you're not using language or working on language, like that articulation, she's exaggerating, she's including all those sounds. So
Mm-hmm.
that's good home practice as well, sitting,
Yeah. And
with your
those are
child.
and those are things that I tell parents all the time about singing nursery rhymes and singing things like that
Yep.
and singing songs
Yep.
is you can do that when you're in the car and they're in the
Exactly.
car seat strapped in the back when you've got them in
Yeah.
the bathtub.
Yeah.
You can sing anytime, anywhere.
Exactly.
So I also see on your social media that you incorporate a lot of movement. In particular, there was one video, I think you were working on a K sound maybe, or maybe an R. I can't remember what sound you were
Mhm.
working on, but you had the little girl jump up and kind of roll back on her
Oh,
back
yeah.
to
Yeah.
pull that tongue back in a better position. So tell
Yes.
me about incorporating movement.
Yes. So again, coming with that exercise science
Mm-hmm.
background, just even anatomy, I grew up loving the human body. Like, I just think it's so interesting. And I remember taking biomechanics and just remembering like every little thing just like translates to the next body part. And
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, not to get specific, but I just think it's super cool. So taking that background, I've also seen a lot of research where it's just like movements and getting kids up and about uh, helps them visually track and also just understand like the gross motor and fine motor behind
Mm-hmm.
it. So I think our field is, we talk about the depth behind it. I think it's so impactful and so deep that yes, we're collaborating with occupational therapists. Yes, we're collaborating with physical therapists, but like we are, in a sense, both OT and PT with
Right.
sensory, with movements.
Mm-hmm.
So that movement piece, I've just noticed a huge trend of um, like even following directions. I'll, have them for like spatial concepts, put the apple, run to the treadmill, put it on there, and then tell them to put something underneath the
Mm-hmm.
bin. And so, like
That
that
whole body
movement,
movement.
right? Exactly. So it's that joint attention. You brought up a great point. That whole body movement. It's not just like we're focused on. We talk
The
about
speech
speech,
outfit.
from the head to the lungs, but like we're looking at the whole person, and we want to make things functional. So, um, yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but I know
It
that like,
It did. So
yeah,
I talk a lot about when I'm working with my early intervention kids, and I talked about this in one of the podcasts that I did, Birth to 18 Months, that motor imitation piece.
yeah,
Before I had kids of my own, before I went to graduate school, I thought that Wheels on the Bus or Peekaboo was just something that you did with kids because they couldn't really do anything else. But
mm,
there's a reason behind it. Like you're
yeah,
doing that to teach that motor imitation piece.
yeah,
And I use a lot of that, like you said, the whole body, especially in teaching spatial concepts. So getting the kids to stand up and go stand behind the door, getting the kids to stand up and put something
yeah,
under the chair, put something on top of the filing cabinet. And that just seems to help so much more because it makes sense to them rather
right,
than looking at, a picture on the screen or in a book. Just getting up and getting that motor imitation piece
yeah,
is so important.
yeah, and exactly, it's that application we talk
Mm-hmm.
about. In grad school, I had some of the greatest professors, I think, and they're super smart. But I mean, um, the greatest philosophers could teach us, but I think a lot of us are, visual learners. We're
Mm-hmm.
application based. So the greatest philosophers could teach us from a book. But until I went out into my clinical fellowship, I did my rotations. That's where I learned the most. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
that's where a lot of us flourish because it's like, oh, okay, that's how we implement
Right.
the AAC device instead of just looking at a book and saying, this
Mm-hmm.
is how you implement. So yeah, I've noticed too with a lot of um, kids with apraxia. I have one kid where I use a lot of dysarthric movements and like working on his lung capacity, but like playing basketball, I
Mm-hmm.
post videos of that
Yeah.
where, yeah, I try to tire him out because I'm telling him you have to use your lungs. Like you have to have that diaphragmatic breathing rather
Right.
than, the clavicular breathing. So like showing him that piece where it's like, oh, I'm tired. I need to speak from my lungs. I need to vocalize, hi,
Mm-hmm.
Kevin, rather than, we're in a chair working on cards and he's like slouched over.
Slouch down.
So,
The
yeah, I
positioning is
think,
so important.
right, right. So, a lot of motor movements. And like you said, just that application and understanding your body,
Yeah. I
which
love
will
it.
go a long way.
Okay, so we've talked about the music, we've talked about the movement, and this is what I'm super excited to ask you about. the sensory haircuts.
Yes, another big passion.
Tell us about the sensory haircuts. What is a sensory haircut? Who is the clientele that you're providing these sensory haircuts to? And how did you get started in that?
Yeah, so I'll start at the beginning with sensory haircuts or haircuts in general. I have always cut my hair since however long I've known. I remember my dad used to give me the classic, shave head.
Buzz
And
cut, yeah.
right. And I was like, Dad, can you help me fade? And it would never turn out, the way I wanted. So just had to go to school, with just a basic haircut, which was fine. And then remember going to like Great Clips and the other shops around there, and they just didn't get it the way I wanted. So in turn, I was just like, I want what I want. So like, I just got to figure out how to cut my own hair. And so that developed and learned how to cut my own hair. And so when I was in my clinical fellowship, that's where it started. I was in a session, and one of the parents was talking aloud. She was like, "Oh gosh, I got to get his haircut." And I was like, "Is it difficult?" And she was like, "Yeah, it's like a 4 or 5 hour thing."
Oh
And I
my
was like,
goodness.
"What?" And she was like, "Yeah, the whole family has to get prepared, and it's like a whole thing." And I was like, "Really?" And I was like, "Well, I cut my own hair. I cut my cousins. I've been learning. Why don't I try it?" And she was like, "Okay, but like fair warning, it's
Just letting you know it's
and
going to be hard.
yeah." And I was like, I mean, I had patience. So, I remember at the time I was, and I still am working with occupational therapists. So I was like, "Hey, you see this kid? Can you help regulate?" And I didn't know a lot about sensory input, but I knew that the occupational therapist was going to help out. So we do the haircut. He's regulated, and a lot of things in my life, speech therapy, just I'm learning what works for one person and what doesn't work. Just like myself, like we're humans. What
Right.
works and what doesn't work. So it was trial and error. All right, you're not liking me sing. I won't sing. Let's play, music on the phone. That was beneficial. Uh, we counted to 20. Ooh, that's too long. Let's just count to 10 and we'll take a break. So that's the cool thing, which I love about speech therapy and what I love about sensory haircuts, because I'm playing detective and I love mysteries. Like
Right.
that's my genre. I love mysteries. So
Yeah, you always have to have a bag of tricks, because what you
exactly.
have planned, and I learned that the hard way in graduate school, what you have planned may not be what is going to happen. And you've got to
Exactly.
be able to make those adjustments and change on the fly and come up with things. Okay, well, that
Right.
didn't work. Let's try this. Like, quick.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and he did well. Like we went from 4 hours to we maybe finished in 45 minutes, a
Oh,
typical
wow.
haircut, 45 an hour. And so after that, I mean, obviously she was very happy.
His mom was
And
like, okay, I'm coming to you every 4 or 5 weeks and you've got to
right,
cut his hair now.
right. So after that, I was like, all right, I feel like I could do this.
Maybe this is a thing. Yeah.
Right. And so from that moment, just like speech, it clicked. I started getting word of mouth, just like, hey, I can do haircuts, I can travel. And so just from that first kid, I've learned, fading techniques. I've learned again, just like what works. I know that those clippers were loud. Let me get some quieter clippers.
Yeah.
I've learned to be more efficient. Instead of I'm a perfectionist, I'm like, all right, let me get
Most
that
speechies are. Most
right.
speechies are perfectionists. Yeah.
Yep. So now I'm just like, but I've learned a lot about the child. I've learned a lot about just humans and like how we need our sensory needs to be met and the importance behind that. So, I mean, we all have sensory needs.
Oh,
We
yeah.
can
I
be
mean, I can't
overwhelmed.
sleep. I can't sleep without a weighted blanket. Like,
Wow.
I just
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
And
What do you
even
do
if
if
it's
you don't have
100,
it?
yeah, even if it's well, I went to Cabo for 2 weeks this summer. And do you know what I put in my carry-on?
A weighted blanket?
My weighted blanket. Yeah,
Yeah.
true story. My daughter was like, "I cannot believe you're taking this weighted blanket." And I'm like, "We're gonna be there for 2 weeks. I wanna enjoy my vacation." So I have to, even if, here in Mississippi now it's 100 degrees, but I'm sitting on the couch with a blanket over me.
Yeah.
So it's just that sensory, and I don't like the sand. I don't want sand on me. I don't
Yeah.
want the sand on my feet. So
Yeah.
yeah, everyone has sensory issues. Are your typical clients for these sensory haircuts, are they typically children on the autism spectrum?
Correct.
Yeah.
And yes, they have sensory needs. And it's been rewarding too to see a lot of families. I would say 25% of the time I'm going into a home, they're coming to me, and their hair is, I mean, long. It's almost to their waist. And they tell me they're just not able to get it cut because
Mhm.
the child won't let them touch their hair,
Mhm.
can't wash it. And so just to be in that moment of their life to like just meet them where they're at
Those
and
vulnerable moments that
right,
those families are dealing with
right,
that we often take for granted. I have to go
right.
get my hair cut, so I'm gonna take 30 minutes out and go get my
Yeah,
hair cut, or the mom who has to take her kids, oh, it's really quick to great clips, like you said, and they can't do that. So they
right.
have to be very vulnerable with you and say, "Hey, this is a part of our lives that's very difficult."
Yeah.
And then Kevin, the singing SLP, is to the rescue. So,
I
and you
appreciate it.
typically go to these families' homes, or they come to you and it's just been by word of mouth, you said?
Correct. There's about 50, it's a 50-50 split. Like today I have a couple of haircuts, so they'll come to the office and then Saturdays are the times I'll usually travel out and do like one location. So downtown Atlanta, try to get a lot of families. So it's not just like me going there
Yeah.
once. But yeah, I just know that it's been so rewarding to see that. And I just want to continue to provide these haircuts for a lot of parents that and families that don't know the service. And I show on social media, and I want to continue to show that like they, it's not all sunshine. I mean, like
No, it's not
I
always
I get
rainbows
the
and unicorns.
tears. Yeah, yeah, I get the tears, and I do want to educate people that it is hard. Like the first haircut, and even second, third, like it's hard.
Yeah.
But I want to also provide an experience and make sure that holding down, that's like the last resort. And I want to make sure if we to be safe, like if we get to that point that they're with the loved one, um,
Mhm.
and so like, yeah, it will be 45 minutes, 50 minutes. Like I will take as long as we need so we don't have to get to that point. But, and there is a point where we got to get the haircut. And I know
Right.
it sounds sad. Like I don't want to force it.
And
But
traumatize them. Yeah.
right. But if we have one side of the hair cut, you know what I mean? Like
You
I don't want to leave my
right,
guy
you've
looking
gotta
like
get the
that.
other side cut, right. Has
Um,
there ever been a child that you just had to abandon ship and just be like, "We're gonna have to come revisit at a later time?"
yeah, there one time and it again motivated me to just continue to be that sensory guy to make sure that, they don't go to a barber shop and their needs are ignored. So
Right.
what I mean by that is we tried, the sensory brush, just even coming into the room, it was traumatic. So yeah, we just let it rest after 30 minutes or so. Um, and that's okay. Like I want to make sure that I know that it's so hard for these parents and caregivers because
Mhm.
it's their loved one and they're
Right.
they're not able to do something that is what they see other children do. So,
Right.
I want to provide that comfort and tell them that like it's okay. We'll revisit it. Like I don't want to ignore that fact. So, um, I just want everything is about me and about speech therapy. We want our kids, our patients, adults to be functional in life. And
Mhm.
at the end of the day, if we don't get that haircut, I still haven't seen them, but hope to, this year or next year. at the end of the day, if we are even able to get him in the room, for me, and I want to convey that to the parents and families out there, like that is the biggest win.
Right.
Because speech therapy, everything in life is not a linear thing. Sometimes we win the lottery, but I haven't won the lottery, but
I
everything
know.
in life is a, slow
It's up and
progression. We
down.
get
Yeah.
plateaus, so, like that's a huge win. And,
Yeah. And taking those baby steps. I think you're right. This week,
right,
this time we got in the room and we were able to come in the room. And next time you may get them to sit in the chair.
right,
And so just taking those baby steps, I think that's awesome.
exactly.
That is incredible that you provide that service. That's
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you.
All right. Kevin, it has been incredible having you on the show today. I have enjoyed this so very much, and I know our listeners are going to as well.
It's been
Tell
so fun.
us where we can find you on social media, because I want everyone to experience this joy that I get to experience by maybe stalking, maybe not stalking your social media.
I appreciate it. You can find me on Instagram, Singing SLP. And yeah, a lot of people send me DMs and they're like, "Oh wow, I'm surprised you messaged back." But like,
Yeah, that was me.
I love connecting with people. Like I'm not, the numbers don't mean anything to me. I just love making connections. So yeah, we're on the same level here, and send me a DM. Let's talk it up.
Yeah, that's how I got in touch with you. I sent you a DM,
Yeah.
and when you responded back, I was like, "Oh my gosh, he responded! I'm so excited!"
Yeah.
The Singing SLP. So yeah, I was like awestruck. It's like a star. I was starstruck. Yeah, it was awesome.
Thank you.
Gosh, Kevin, thank you so very much for joining us today. Best of luck in all of your ventures. And we're definitely going to stay in touch. The next time I'm in Atlanta, I'll have to give you a call. You'll have to meet us at a Braves game.
Yes, that's correct. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us today on SLP Full Disclosure. We're going to make sure that you have connections to Kevin Simmons, the Singing SLP, so you can find him on social media. We'll see y'all next time. Bye. Thank you for tuning in to SLP Full Disclosure. You can learn more about this episode and our show on our website at amnhealthcare.com. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. You can also find show updates and SLP opportunities on our Instagram at AMN Allied. Special thanks to AMN Healthcare for making this show possible. See y'all next time.